At 67, I had long made peace with the quiet, predictable rhythm of widowhood. My husband, Richard, had passed away 5 years earlier. Since then, I had immersed myself in the comforting monotony of daily routines, tending the garden, managing the household, and being available to my children, though they were now grown and fully independent. My days were filled with purpose, but not passion. There was no space left for romance. That chapter of my life had ended when Richard's did. Or so I believed. It was a mild April morning when everything began to shift. My son James had mentioned that his friend Ethan, a contractor by trade, could stop by to help with a few small repairs around the house. The faucet in the kitchen had been leaking for weeks, and a few of the stair railings had come loose, tasks I had learned to ignore. Ethan was 45. I had known him since he was a teenager, often hanging around with James in the summers, helping with school projects and playing basketball in our driveway. I always remembered him as polite and soft-spoken. That day when he rang the doorbell, I was struck by how much he had changed, and yet how familiar he still felt. Tall, broad-shouldered, with streaks of silver beginning to thread through his dark hair. He wore a kind smile that immediately put me at ease. "Good to see you again, Mrs. Whitmore," he said with a grin. "Call me Evelyn," I replied, chuckling. "You're far too grown up for formalities." His visit was supposed to be quick, just a favor. He fixed the faucet, tightened the railing, and insisted on checking a few other things, just in case. But what surprised me most was the ease with which we fell into conversation. We talked about his recent hiking trip to the Rockies, his favorite books, my old travel journals, and the time Richard and I drove across Italy with nothing but a paper map and a loosely planned itinerary. I hadn't laughed like that in a long time. After that day, Ethan started coming by more often, not just for repairs, but to bring over homemade soup when he'd made too much, or to ask for advice on a garden he was planning. At first, I told myself he was just being kind, honoring some unspoken loyalty to James or perhaps trying to fill some quiet space in his own life. But slowly I started to notice the little things. He'd stay a bit longer than necessary. He'd listen with intent, eyes fixed on mine as if every word mattered. He complimented my cooking, the flowers I planted by the porch, even the way I styled my silver hair on breezy afternoons. It wasn't overbearing, it was subtle. But it was enough to stir something inside me I hadn't felt in decades. It wasn't until an evening in early June that everything truly changed. I had asked Ethan to help carry some old boxes into the attic. The task was simple enough. Old photo albums, Richard's old books, and a dusty record player that hadn't seen use in years. Afterward, we sat down in the living room, tea in hand, as the sun cast long, golden beams through the lace curtains. The house felt quieter than usual, the silence humming with something unspoken. "I always loved this house," Ethan said, sipping his tea. "It feels lived in, warm, like you." I laughed, brushing off the compliment, but my pulse quickened. Then came the silence. "I hope this doesn't sound strange," he said, voice low and uncertain, "but I've never met anyone quite like you, Evelyn. You're radiant, smart, strong, and beautiful. So very beautiful." I looked at him, stunned. For a moment, I could only hear the ticking of the old grandfather clock by the hallway. "You're too kind, Ethan," I said finally, trying to smile. "I'm an old woman." He shook his head gently. "No, you're not. You're vibrant. You have more life in you than most people I know. I'm not even sure age matters the way people think it does. I feel drawn to you in a way I can't explain." His words hit me like a wave. I had lived so long seeing myself only as a widow, as someone in the closing chapters of her life. Hearing those words, genuine, sincere, made something stir inside me. Warmth, spark. Over the next few weeks, his visits became more frequent. We spent hours talking, sometimes sitting quietly and listening to old jazz records, sometimes walking through the neighborhood at dusk, sharing stories and secrets we'd never told anyone else. He opened up about his failed marriage, his longing for something deeper, something real. I spoke of Richard, of the loneliness that crept in at night, of the fear of becoming invisible with age. One evening we sat side by side on the couch. The air was thick with the scent of lilacs from the open window. Our hands brushed. A current passed between us, subtle but unmistakable. "I want to kiss you, Evelyn," he whispered. His voice hushed and trembling with longing. My breath caught. My heart thudded against my chest. I had 100 reasons to say no. The age difference, the judgment, the fear of what others would think. But none of them mattered as much as the truth I saw in his eyes. I leaned in. His lips met mine gently, reverently. It wasn't the kind of kiss you see in movies, full of urgency and passion. It was something deeper. It was slow, tender, full of intention and care. It awakened a part of me I had thought was long gone. A part that wanted to be touched, to be desired, to be seen not as someone aging, but as a woman. A whole woman. When we pulled apart, I felt a rush of emotion. Fear, joy, confusion, and an aching kind of hope. "I don't care about age," Ethan said, touching my cheek. "I care about you. And I want to be with you, whatever that looks like." That night, we didn't rush into anything physical. We talked, curled up on the couch like teenagers, sharing stories and dreams. When I finally went to bed, I did so feeling lighter than I had in years. Over time, our connection deepened. Slowly, cautiously, we explored the possibility of us. The world around us continued as usual, but inside my small, familiar home, something extraordinary was blossoming. Ethan never made me feel like I was too old. He didn't see the lines around my eyes as flaws. He traced them like a map, each one a story. He marveled at my strength, my resilience, the way I carried years of living with grace. With him, I didn't feel diminished. I felt amplified. He brought color back into my world. I began to dress differently. Not to impress, but to express. I wore brighter blouses, painted my nails for the first time in years, and even let myself dream again. I caught myself smiling at my reflection, not out of vanity, but because I saw a woman rediscovered. The stares came, of course. Friends and neighbors noticed. Some whispered. Others asked questions thinly veiled in concern. But I had no shame. How could I? I had found love. Not youthful infatuation, but something grounded and generous, something brave. One evening, as we sat in the backyard under the stars, Ethan took my hand in his. "I used to think love had a deadline," he said softly. "That it only came at a certain age, a certain phase. But then I met you, and you changed everything." Tears welled in my eyes. I had once believed that my time for love had passed, that romance was for the young, and all that was left for me was to watch from the sidelines. But Ethan had walked into my life and, without knowing it, reminded me that love does not retire. It doesn't check birth certificates or consult calendars. It arrives when it's meant to. Now, as I sit here months later, sipping tea in the same sunlit living room, I find myself smiling at the memory of that first kiss, that first spark. The woman I am today is not the same woman I was 5 years ago. She is fuller, brighter, bolder. Ethan and I didn't rewrite the rules. We simply broke free of them. Love found me when I least expected it. And it taught me that no matter the years, no matter the past, we are all deserving of a second spring.